Today, we're going to visit Shreveport, Louisiana, as we look behind the scenes of a family story, one story at a time. The headlines appear glamorous and have all the glitz and glitter that could easily distract you from the heart of the story, one built on faith and family. We will share dreams and memories, awards and records, heartbreak and scars, entrepreneurship and business, as we discuss how they balanced success and notoriety within their family. We'll reminisce draft day with the Marlins, visit Tiger Stadium on Saturday night, watch the Trojan horse enter the LA Coliseum, and the Friday night lights of Evangel and Calvary football, while imagining the sound of Boomer Sooner echoing in the background. Most people would love to experience just one of these moments in their lifetime, and yet our guests have lived them all. The birthplace of the Booty story starts within the heart of a father's dream, a couple's call to serve, and a family of faith and four boys who learned how to throw and catch in their own backyard. This is a story of a generational legacy and a kingdom vision. So let me introduce you to Johnny, Josh, Abram, JD, Jack, and General. My name is Ken Karcher, and I'll be your host. And alongside me is my son, Austin Karcher, the co-host. Today, we'd like to welcome Johnny Booty as our guest to awaken kingdom culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time. Welcome, Johnny.
Man, hey, I love it. Just hearing that intro, man, it took me back through a lot of different experiences. I felt it, man. It's good to be with you, Ken, and good to be with you, Austin.
Yeah, same here.
We're excited to have your story be told, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But so Johnny, Austin and I were talking, and I know some of this, and he doesn't. But let's go back to your growing up years and some of Johnny Booty's dreams. Some get fulfilled, some don't get fulfilled, and just share some of those thoughts with our audience, and then even tie it into how you meet your high school sweetheart.
Yeah, I'd love to. My story is a story of like a lot of athletes around this country. I grew up sort of a street kid. I had an older brother, Ronnie, and my little sister, Gayla. Bless her heart. She had to she had to survive, Ronnie and I. But grew up on the streets of Shreveport in a little place called Cedar Grove, very blue collar, and where sports was king. And we had great athletes, man. It was the renaissance, I guess, of high school football. And you had the Terry Bradshaws and the Joe Fergusons and the Burt Jones and on and on and on. We had them. You name them, we had them. Stan Humphries and all. We had so many Super Bowl quarterbacks that, when I grew up, we were thinking of Joe Namath and Pennsylvania as the cradle of quarterbacks. But actually, yeah, Ken, actually in North Louisiana, I don't know if it's been surpassed in Super Bowl quarterbacks or the like. And so I grew up in the shadows of that type of life and lifestyle. Nobody cared really about how much money you had. We were just wanting to play. And so I loved it. My brother's a walk-in sports encyclopedia. And so I had a great big brother. He kept all the facts and figures. Man, I just played. And so it's easy to get emotional. I didn't think I would, but when I think back, I had a great life, young life. I was lost at that time. I didn't know the Lord, and that played out later in my life in a big time way. But when I was a kid, it was just, we wake up like you can probably go to the ballpark and play anybody that was wanting to play.
Now, I've read that you had a hero. Who was your heroes?
Well, my hero, I had so many of them. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe the one you're pointing out, but we had so many sports heroes right here. And again, I played on the same team with Joe Ferguson, who was the number one quarterback in America. And it was really odd, Ken, because we replicated that story as far as the number one quarterback in the land.
Hmm.
I had three in one decade
Oh,
in high school. So, but it was really a replication. A lot of people wonder what happened, but that was sort of the magic in the sauce. We knew how to play, and we knew how to coach it up, and not so much that we were great. It was just what it was in the water. in
well, I heard you love Terry Bradshaw, or at least I guess he was one ahead of you.
well,
He was my hero in Pittsburgh as a Steeler
oh,
fan.
Terry was unbelievable. I could tell you stories about Terry that your audience would love, but he's a phenom. I mean, he was sort of a classic phenom. We had other guys who were great players, maybe even better in high school, but Terry was that giant. He was that guy that we would go out and work out with, and he literally took charge. When he was on the field, it was all about Terry.
Now I know you're being humble, but you were pretty good yourself. So tell our listeners a little bit of your career and then where you went to college, and again, bring us into how you met your sweetheart.
Yes, well, Sonia and I met Sonia in the seventh grade, believe it or not, and she was the prettiest thing at school, and I'll never forget. She came on the playground, and she was just talking. She was a cheerleader type, and she was talking to everybody. My best friend was a street kid, was my best buddy, and I said, I like that girl, but she talks too much. And he said, well, you'll never have to worry about it. She's never going to talk to you. And so we grew up. She became my girlfriend, my sweetheart, all the way through high school from the seventh grade. And then whenever we were both born again, within a month of each other, we were married.
So did she end up going? Tell them a little bit about where you went to college, Johnny. I think you
And I went to high school at Woodlawn. You asked me that. Woodlawn High School. And we had, Ken, you would know the coaches, A.L. Williams and the
yeah.
great A.L. Williams and Lee Hedges. And we had, our whole staff became high school coaches and renowned in their own right. But we were blessed, man. We were coached up. And all the guys who were recruiting us, they would come in and give us their best plays they had, and so it kept us hard to defend because we were getting the best right off the top, right out of the tap, man, of what they were doing offensively. But they could coach as well. But I went to Woodlawn, and my dream was simply to follow them into professional football. I never thought about it any other way. And along the way, I was injured in high school, and sort of set me back from Terry and Joe and with their production numbers. But it was an injury that, as I look back, it would work together for my good because it made me start to really think about how fragile it could all be. And that was sort of a subconsciously, I think, became a beginning of something that became the most important thing in my life, which was Jesus Christ. But I went to University of Arkansas. Austin. I was coached by Joe Gibbs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Raymond Berry. Should I
Another.
go on? We had so many of them. Frank Broyles was head coach, but we never saw him. But Joe Gibbs and Raymond Berry, the legend coaches, and I sure enjoyed working with Raymond. Matter of fact, he was really the first man of God that I ever really met. What I mean by that, I'd met a lot of people in church, but Raymond was a real man of God, man. And I thought I didn't know what to do with him because I was a Cedar Grove street kid. I didn't know what to do with anything that he was talking about, but I could look in his eyes and I knew he was different.
What was something that you remember him bringing up that kind of impacted you?
Oh gosh, I could give you several stories, but we would go through the on our off-season program. Like at every program, you had stations, and Raymond, he knew what he was doing. He left his Bible at a station, and when they would go from whistle to whistle, in between whistles, I opened it up and I saw it all marked up. And man, you could barely read what the scriptures was saying. He would mark it up, and I was going, man, this guy radical. He's into this thing, man. And one day after I began to really be under conviction, I began to see that he was running in an entirely different reality than me, Austin. He really knew the King of Kings. It was real to him, and but it was weird to me at the time. But I felt I was starting to engage in a kingdom beyond anything I knew about. I just didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Wow.
What, Johnny? I think there was a point there when you were, I guess, figuring out that you weren't going to go pro. That you and Sonia felt a real call from God in your life. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, the injury kept nagging me. It was a knee injury, always the left knee, right? And I was trying to deal with that injury. I was really more like a runner thrower type, maybe would have been a lot like Johnny Manziel kind of. I'd run, throw, scramble, move, and that was my personality. But when I was injured, for some reason, it did a real number in my mind, and so I told myself, I'm going to be as good a thrower as Joe Ferguson. I'm just going to dedicate my life to learn how to throw like Joe. And we worked out every day, and it wasn't long before I could really throw, and my feet were good. I could really run. I was a track guy too, so I could really run, but I had to perfect my throw because I didn't have a lot of confidence, on my left leg, not like I should be, not like you should have. And so I became a thrower. Sonia was just trying to figure me out along the way because now as I got older, as it is, everything started to get confusing, and I was beginning my dream of just growing up as a street kid, that was sort of in the distance. And now I'm having to deal with very real problems in very real times. And in the 70s, early 70s, it was a very, much like today, it was a lot of turmoil in our nation. And it was pressing in from all sides. And I became curious at that point, and Sonia too. And as it was, the coaches at Arkansas all went pro, Raymond and Joe. Joe went on, both of them, to Hall of Fame, careers. But I transferred, and at Louisiana Tech I carried with me a lot of questions about what was going on. And one of my teammates knew the Lord, really knew the Lord, Denny Duran, who you've met, Ken. And he really knew the Lord. And it was odd because he wasn't just talking religion, he knew the Lord. Yeah. And I had all kind of questions. Sonia had questions. And one day I had been ruled ineligible to play at Tech. It was a politics kind of decision. And a lot of the other schools in the state had felt like they had recruited me, but they hadn't. Of course, now everything's totally different, but they really hadn't. But it was the politics I learned, and there were people in politics that didn't want me there. And anyway, I ended up when they ruled me ineligible, I really hit a nosedive, and that's when I asked Denny if he knew anything about some guy told me Jesus was coming back. And I didn't know why. I couldn't figure out why would he want to come back. It was bad the first time, it was, in my reasoning, who would have thought, like Good Friday is today, but in my reasoning, Good Friday was horrible. it was dark, man. And these guys couldn't appreciate any of his gifting and love and authority and what he was trying to do. In my own way, I was just trying to figure all that out. And, I said, why would he want to come back? So I said, do you know anything about him coming back? And why would he want to do it? And he sort of laughed at me. And he said, well, I'd like to share all that with you. He said, I can tell you why. But he said, you won't understand it all. And I said, why? And he said, unless you're born again, you can't see the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. And Johnny, you need him. And I said, well, I'm a good sinner. I know that. I'm good at that. I know I need a savior, but I don't know anything about how to make any of that happen, And so he gave me this passage, man. It burns in my soul. He said, as many as received him, to them he gives the power to become the sons of God. And he said, would you like to receive him? And I went, well, he said, I'll pray with you. And I went, no. I don't want you touching me. I don't want you praying for me. I didn't know what was about to happen, you see. So he slipped out of the room. He said, "We'll talk about it then another time." And when he slipped out, Ken, that's when I went to my knees for the very first time in my life. And I just, I just said, "Lord, I believe you're real. I don't know how to make any of this work, but I yield. And if you take me and make it real, I just don't want to be religious." That was my prayer.
Amen.
And I went to sleep, and also the very last thing I thought about, I said, I wonder if I'll ever think about this again. And I woke up the next morning, and I knew that I had been born again. It was just real. I don't know how it happened, but somehow God just dealt in my heart and gave me a new heart when I was sleeping. I woke up, and of course, I went to talk to Sonia about it, and she could not believe the change. She could see a change that I couldn't understand. People began to see that something's happened to you. And it was just the peace of God. It was real. It got all into my spirit, and it was manifesting, and became a light that I wasn't even aware of. And so I told her, and she was shook by it. She didn't know what to think about it, what that might mean to our relationship. And then, of course, I went to see Denny, and down the hallway, he pointed at me and he said, "You met him. You met him." I said, "Yeah, yeah, And so that was such a radical thing, Ken. And for me, football now took a secondary role. I mean, I still loved it, and I could really play, but and I knew it, but nothing compared now to what I was feeling. So that was my entrance into the kingdom of God. And from that day to this day, almost it'll be in April. In April the 3rd, it'll be 51 years ago,
Oh wow, that's awesome.
and still just as real, more real now than ever. I mean, I feel emotions like when I'm talking to you guys. I actually still feel that.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's just really encouraging. I mean, you're sitting here saying that you don't even understand, the ins and outs and everything, but the reality is it's still true, and it transformed and took over your life, and it wasn't even like you felt like you had the complete understanding. It just shows that His
That's
power is
exactly
real.
right. That's
Yeah.
what it had to be for me. I know God gave me a real good dose, because I couldn't imagine myself being cold, or it being sort of just go to church on Sunday. I couldn't do that. I had to have something with a real deal,
Yeah.
where I could feel it, and He knew what I needed, so He gave me a good dose, and Sonia too. Then she came to Christ. She was a good Episcopalian, and then about 3 or 4 days later, she asked Christ to come and live in her, and of course, she loves the Lord and has been such a wonderful mom to my boys, great grandmother to my grandchildren.
Johnny, talking about Sonia there for a minute, my wife and I, Pauline, who you know, and Sonia knows,
Yes,
we've stayed in your home, and we were talking
yeah,
before yesterday, and she said, I'll never forget. We visited their home, and she said, we go into our bedroom, and Sonia has a basket of fruit and crackers and candy, and she goes, Southern hospitality. She goes, that made me feel like, wow,
yeah.
what a wonderful family and home and environment, and
Thank you.
Sonia is such a wonderful host at that time with us coming there, and a lot of great memories. But
We sure do. We loved having you, Ken, and
so
knew that there was something special in your life and Pauline and the family, that their God was going to do something great, and obviously He has. And this is the beginning. You're telling stories around the world. That's what an opportunity. What a great thing, that a door that God's opened for you.
well, and we'll get into all this here in a minute, but you have sons, and I have sons and daughters, but
Yeah,
to be able to do this with my son is really a blessing. I
the
can't tell you.
best.
It's fun watching them throw touchdown pass, but this is amazing to do this
Yes,
with.
it's amazing. I know it. Well, my sons and I, we're still talking every day, and when I can catch Josh travels like crazy. I've never known any man that since he's 19, he's been traveling to a different city, it seems like. And but Abram and John David and Jack, man, they're just fun. And then my grandchildren, I love every minute with them.
Well, so Coach, how would you describe? Obviously you've touched on that you have four sons. Can you tell us kind of how it was, raising them, and maybe
Yes.
how you built relationship with them, and how your relationship is still molding and growing even up until this point with each individual son?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Well, with Josh, he's my first, and man, I didn't want to push anything on him, as you hear that from a lot of fathers, but I didn't have to. Josh is gregarious and fun and full of laughter and joy and competitive juices. So he came up, he was a baseball rat. Man, he didn't start throwing a football until about the seventh grade because he knew he was going to be a major leaguer. But when he started throwing, Austin, it was pretty amazing. I mean, when the kid started throwing, you went, my God, he's got he's just a dynamic thrower. But he's got two of my boys have a tattoo on their arm. It's big dreams, and
Yeah.
that sort of it speaks about, I think, Josh and JD both were, and all of them, Abram and Jack, they grew up with dreams, and I love dreamers, and
Mm.
I think that's about one of the greatest things that we can help foster in our kids is big dreams. The world is constantly trying to steal from us and rob us of dreams, but if you allow yourself and the Holy Spirit, He can kindle those dreams and shape them and guide them and create life that we would never be able to even dream about. And that's what I guess that's what I did. I tried to cultivate dreams
Mm.
at every turn and no limitations. Again, that was just something the Holy Spirit gave us and Sonia too, and we let them dream. We didn't try to say, well, you're going to get your feelings hurt or anything like that. We just said, go for it, big boy. Try it.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's do it. And they did. But Josh, of course, he went on to be the National Player of the Year. But Austin, Ken got to see us in our height of evangel. But when we started, we had 16 choir boys on our football team. It was awful. We were awful. And from that beginning, in that dream, by Josh's third year, his senior year, we won the first state championship,
Wow.
and he was the National Player of the Year, and uh, played on the U.S. Olympic team in baseball, and it was just quite a thing. I mean, I could tell you a million stories about that, but the rest of them have great stories in their own right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me interrupt you for a moment. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I have to do this podcast with my son, Austin. For the last 10 years, Austin and I have had many intimate conversations on his drive home from work. Some of these father-son conversations have been lighthearted, while others have been very deep and emotional. Over the Christmas holidays, we decided to start a podcast called Awaken Kingdom Culture, where we invite our friends to share their life-changing stories with you, our listeners. This podcast is done under our nonprofit, The Win Awakening, a sports ministry network for coaches, athletes, and those who lead. Our vision is to awaken hearts and minds, one story at a time. Our mission is to encourage coaches and athletes and those who lead to live from a place of victory, regardless of success, records, or the scoreboard. Our goal is to create safe environments where transparency and vulnerability are accepted, and value and worth are recognized in an atmosphere of love. Right in the middle of your mess, I'm reminded daily that the most important person of my day is the one in front of me, and that one matters, and that you are the one. WinAwakening.org is our website. I encourage you to visit our website where you can encounter the good news of who you are in Christ and what you already possess and how to live from it. There you'll find blogs, videos, Andrew's journal, and this podcast. Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time. I'm thankful for all of you who have given and are a member of Team Win. Awaken Kingdom Culture is listener supported. And if you'd like to support us, you can go to winawakening.org. We are a nonprofit. I encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And please like, share, and write a review on Spotify or YouTube. Okay, it's time to get back to the podcast.
So, obviously, y'all have a connection to the quarterback position, and
Yeah.
This is the first time I've ever really met you in person, but I can remember being a little kid and my dad coming home with like a red hat with like that E, that script E. I had no clue what that was. Eventually, I knew that was Evangel.
Yeah.
But my dad always spoke very highly, and when he always talked about people who understood the quarterback position, he always talked about this guy named John Booty,
Yeah.
and he said he's one of the best QB coaches there is. So, kind of as a QB whisperer, Coach, what are some of the what is some of the wisdom you have at coaching that position?
Well, it just goes back to my childhood, and getting to watch. I was observing a lot of great people, and I would hear them talk, and I listened to what they were saying. Like Terry Bradshaw, I said, "How can you throw so good?" I mean, when he'd come out on the field, and cameras would be following him. Of course, I was much younger, and he would give me just these real succinct answers. I said, "How do you throw so good?" And he said, "I throw a lot." Yeah, and I said, "Okay, that means I got to throw a lot." And then I'd say, "Joe, you're so you're so refined in all of your movements and your separations." He said, "Well, come, let's work out together." And he started showing me. He was probably, Joe was the National Player of the Year, but he probably ran a 5 flat 40, Austin.
Yeah.
But we could be playing with 4 or 5 outside receivers, and I heard Joe say this a lot. You'll never get to your mark or where you're breaking before I get to my mark where I'm going to be throwing from.
Yeah.
Which meant he's going to quick it. He's going to be quick.
Yeah.
And a lot of that then was coming out of schools of thought. Ken will remember it. Joe Namath and his separations, the quickness of feet, the fluidity of how he opens his hips, and he threw off an anchor rather than having to reset.
Yeah.
After you build your strength, you can throw that 15-yard out on an anchor. You don't have to reset. Now, if you have time, you can reset, but learn to throw where you can drop anchor and get it out of your hand.
Yeah.
Well, those were realities when I was a child that even a lot of quarterbacks wouldn't even know today,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So those were some of the things. I mean, it's so detailed as you know it, but we learned it. We just learned it from great people.
Awesome. So give us a little bit of your perspective on just athletics in general. Obviously, it was a big part of your family. Obviously athletics has probably changed throughout your life.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on it?
Well, General is living it now at Oklahoma, and the NIL has changed everything. It'll never go back to being what we used to know it as. I don't know if Ken could deal with that world. Saban, I think, just got out because he didn't want to deal with that world very good.
I always tell people, Johnny, I said I missed it by about 20 years. I'd have been a great man coming out of high school.
Your father would have been a millionaire at 19. Yeah. Well, General's living it now, and he has I mean, it is what it is, I could see where it was going. My son Abram has actually written a movie, and it's been bought, and now they're talking about making it into a TV series where it's on the subject of what's going on in athletics today, and it'll be an exciting series if they do it, because it sort of gets you behind the curtains. You've been there, Austin and Ken, you've lived it. there's a lot going on behind those curtains, and it's not all particularly good, especially among lost men. When I say that, I don't say that condescendingly, but I'm saved by the grace of God. But when men don't understand that greed can wreck a life so fast, and materialism, and especially if no one has ever been used to it, and all of a sudden you give them everything. And most of the time, it doesn't turn out very good unless there's a mentor there, somebody can really share with him. I'm for prosperity. I just know that these kids are now living in a world that not they've never been used to.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you have obviously all your sons were recruited,
Yes.
and you were recruited as well. Do you have any good recruiting stories that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, I do. We, of course, when Josh came up his junior year, he was not only recruited in D1, almost every D1 school in America, but all the major league scouts were all over the place all the time. And so it was a lot of funny stories. I would take I could write a good book about some of those stories, but uh, they all brought their personalities into your house, and it was great. I had 100 questions for every one of them. I wanted to know more about them than they wanted to know about us, but we had a lot of fun, and got a lot of great information, learned a lot of football. Coach Walsh, you know, I mean, what a remarkable 2 days we spent with him in Stanford. That's great stories. I mean, he showed me a lot of things about his own life, but the
That was before he went to
Spurriers.
the 49ers. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
he'd come back to Stanford. Well, I think he had been with the 49ers, came back to
Oh,
Stanford, and
okay.
he was calling it. It was at the very end.
Oh, okay.
But man, he had he had a thirst to learn. He was asking me questions about why we did things at Evangel. I said, "Are you kidding me? You want to know what we did?" He said, "Yeah." So at one time, you'd love this, Austin. We were doing the deep shotgun because we didn't have the offensive lineman.
Right.
So we took Josh, and he had this big arm. So we put him back 7, 8 yards in the shotgun, and we didn't need an offensive line.
They
We
can't
just
hit the
dropped him
center,
back
right?
another.
If you're that deep, is that right?
Yeah, we didn't need it. We could throw. If we had four good receivers that are quick, we were going to make something happen.
Yeah.
And we told our offensive linemen, just get in their way.
Yeah.
Just get in their way. And then we schemed it up. It was really cool. But Coach Walsh said, how did you do that? And he said, after I watched that, he said, I went up in my attic and I found a book from 1948 where somebody was actually doing that kind of thing. So that tells you a lot about him. I
Yeah.
mean, he was already legendary, but he wanted to know more about it. But
That's a great story. That
yeah,
really is.
fun.
Well, let's transition to where I guess the Booty name became a household name. And I know I came across it, as I mentioned to us off the air, in 1993 as the offensive coordinator at the University of Pittsburgh. Louisiana was my state to recruit. And I made my way up to Evangel Christian Academies. I had heard they had some players, specifically Josh Booty. And I stood on those sidelines and I shook my head and I said, with having a background, Johnny, of being around Christian school and education, because my kids were in Christian schools at that time.
Right.
But as you know, very few Christian schools ever married a great sports program alongside.
Right.
So it was
Uncommon.
foreign to my eyes.
Totally uncommon.
And here's just a side note, and I think you remember this. I think it was the third year that I came down there in 95. I actually brought a board of people. I don't know if you remember this story, because we were going to model a school like that in Pittsburgh. We actually opened the doors.
I remember you telling me all about that.
Yeah, it was called Keystone Christian Academy, and we wanted to really model what Evangel was doing in Louisiana. It ended up only lasting a year and a half, a lot of it because I went and took the Liberty job. But so, tell our listeners, and even Austin will enjoy some of this. I think you're in ministry as a pastor probably for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And transition us to how you got involved with Evangel. I know it was your friend Denny. And
Yep.
tell us a little bit about this Evangel story, and then we'll lead it into Calvary and some of the things that happened in between.
Okay. I traveled the world, Austin, in ministry, sharing my testimony.
Mm.
That was really fun, man. I love going and meeting new people and sharing my testimony, and God just opened up a lot of great friends and personalities and remarkable stories. And it seemed like I just kept growing in my faith because I had these opportunities to be with wonderful people. And but I moved back to Shreveport, and Denny called and told me we're going to start this little Christian school. I wasn't interested at all. I mean, I just, I'd been driving by that little church place and I went, nah, I don't have
Isn't
any
that how it always
desire.
works?
Yeah. I didn't want, I just didn't see it. And he said, please, well, how do you tell a guy that helped lead you to Christ? No, you can't do it, you know? So our first practice was on a parking lot. And when I say we were bad, I mean, we were really bad. Most of them didn't know the difference between offense and defense. And so, but I could see it's going to give me more opportunity to be with Denny again, and we're going to have some fun with it and have some laughs and not take it too seriously. And but he left on me. He traveled a lot too. He said, well, I'm gone. Find us a schedule. So he dumped it back on my shoulders, and lo and behold, I did. I didn't even think I could do it, but I did it, and we got beat by 60 most every game. And that was kind. People were just kind and called the dogs off. We were that bad. But after a while, I'm going, hey kids, I don't like this a whole lot. I don't know about you. We're having laughs and it's fun and all, but if I'm gonna do this, let's play. And now, one thing we did though, kid, you remember, uh, we did. You would have thought you were walking out on the NFL field.
Yes.
We painted it. Our unis were colorful. We did everything in the world. It would be like a circus. I remember Coach Hallman, Curly Hallman, came out there one day and he said, I feel like I'm coming to a circus. Because we had to keep the crowd. We knew football wasn't going to do it. So we had everything in the world going on. And the crowds kept growing, and we couldn't figure out why, other than we were just going to pull every stop out on selling it. Well, before you know it, dads were bringing sons over. They would have been the good second teamers in 5A schools. But they were saying, "Hey, let's go out there and see what those boys are doing." Well, before you know it, we started getting a handful of players, and then we went to a totally different schematic. Everybody was in the wing tee. Remember, Ken?
Yeah.
And then we said, "Man, we're going double wides. Man, we're going to throw every play." BYU with spread offense. And so we mixed run and shoot, John Jenkins and Mouse, and BYU and Norm Chow. We just homogenized it all, if you could believe that, and put it in a hat, pulled out numbers, and it came out pretty sweet. And we started doing it, and then the rest was history. Everybody wanted to play on a team that their football team looked like a basketball team. Yeah. We averaged 55 touchdowns a year for 13, 14 years, touchdown passes, and
Wow.
4,000 or 5,000 yards, and
Quarterback's dream, Austin.
it
Yep,
was, yeah,
yep.
you would have loved it. You would have loved it. Receivers, they started coming in from everywhere, just because they wanted to catch. And we were still doing the same. But the key was, kids, was our testimony. It remained true. God just showed us how to do it. We didn't know how. God just showed us how to do it. And Ken has learned that firsthand. It's a difficult journey, but you've got to want to compete. And a lot of church schools, I don't even know what that means, to want to compete.
Right.
So how did you then think? How many years you spent there? 10?
Pardon me?
How many years did you spend
I
at
think it was
Shreveport?
12, maybe
12
12,
years.
maybe.
So
But we
then,
won. I don't know if we ever. I think Abram's one year with Abram, we did not win the state championship. But the dome was like our second home. We prepared for it. We believed it was ours. And then John David. By that time, now we had the players. I mean, Abram was broke every national record in receiving and held it for 20 years. I think he's still in the top three in almost all the categories. And then John David came along, and man, we had running backs and we had tight ends now, and we had receivers, and our defense was salty. And that's when Ken was picking us up when Brock Berlin was coming through about those years, and
Yeah,
we had defensive.
I remember coming to your house. That was the days of Eric Jefferson and all those guys.
Yeah,
I came to your house, and we I don't know what we did, at dinner or something at your house, and then we go in the front yard, and you tell me, hey, catch some balls with my eighth grader.
yeah,
And JD comes out in the yard, and I said, eighth grader? He looks like a sophomore in college.
no,
And
no.
I can remember telling my wife when I got home, I said, he's got an eighth grader will be an NFL player. I said, I can already tell you that.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
unbelievable.
JD was just something. I mean, and he got a lot of offers in the eighth grade from major schools, and
And that
but
was unheard of back there. That was
pardon me.
unheard of. Back in those days, that was unheard of to offer an eighth grader.
Oh yeah, Miami offered him when they just walked out on the field to watch Brock, and JD was out there throwing. And they offered him on the spot.
So Johnny, now after those 12 years at Evangel,
Yeah,
transition us to why Calvary and then what happened at Calvary to get it in the same position.
yeah. It's another amazing story. Ken, when we left Evangel, again, I'm not thinking I'm ever going to be coaching again, right? But a church on the other side of town said, hey, would you just come and help us and show us how to do it? And I said, man, it's a lot to it, man. I don't know if you guys have the heart or the money to want to try it. And they convinced me that they did. And I said, well, it'll have to be another miracle. We didn't own a helmet, Ken. We didn't own a helmet. And they had barbed wire around the football field. And so, I mean, I can go into a million different stories. I'll cut to the chase. But my youngest son Jack, now he's going, Dad, it's not fair. You gave Josh and Abram and JD these opportunities, and now I'm without. And so I'm convicted. And so I took the job as an AD head coach, and Calvary said, let's do it. I want to do it. So there was a lot of personalities there, and they said, we really would like to replicate. And within 3 years, Austin, in 3 years without owning a helmet, we beat Evangel, the standing room only crowd. And you would not think that's even possible if you'd have seen Evangel in the heyday.
Yeah.
And at Calvary, we did that. Now, my second year there, guess who I hired though as my head coach? Doug Peterson.
What?
Who 4 years later wins a Super Bowl.
The head coach of the Jaguars? Wow.
Yeah. He had just retired with the Packers, looking for a job. Andy Reid told him, I'm not going to hire you until you get a little coaching experience. So I heard he was traveling Interstate 20, going back to Northeast where he played school at ULM. I called him and asked him if he'd stop. He stopped at Calvary, came in.
We lost. There you go.
Yeah,
we hear you now.
I told him that I got to have you, Doug. I need to raise a lot of money. I don't have time to do both. Would you be my head coach? And he shocked me when he said, I sure will. And I said, but you can't be a one and done. I don't need that. He said, I will stay with you, Johnny, until Andy Reid calls and offers me a job. Well, he was true to his word. And that man went to work for me. And I went to work for Calvary. And now it's one of the top sports venues in North Louisiana. And we beat Evangel in our third year, which nobody thought was even remotely possible. And they're still winning championships at Calvary.
Then awesome. I think you end up going into private business or nonprofit. You try some things there.
Yeah.
And then a little bit down the road, you try this, or you're thinking you're going to probably try it a third time at Cornerstone.
Yeah, I was going to do. I was in Southern California, just enjoying myself. Was out there with Abram and John David. That's where they live. Josh and Jack are in Miami. Let me say one other thing. Jack, just one thing about Jack at Calvary, he was my quarterback, and Doug's the coach now. I'm not influencing that, but Jack became the state player of the year. Who would have even dreamt that would happen for him, and led us to a perfect record. But that was Jack's finish up to the whole Calvary thing. It was a marvel of what happened. But yeah, I moved to Southern California. Felt like God directed me there, and then I received a phone call from Cornerstone, John Hagee Ministries, and they wanted to replicate in Cornerstone. And I went there and I helped them for a year. Um, it was it was a little more of a bite to chew than they thought it might be. But I told them before we got started, you gotta really throw yourself at them, to do it. But anyway, I had a good time, and then I moved back to Shreveport since that time. I still do a lot of consulting with schools around the country.
Mm. So, Coach, you know, my dad and I have kind of been talking about, this topic or maybe 5 times now, about what it means to be a kingdom coach.
Yes,
When you
great
when you
subject.
when you hear that, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, it's loaded. It's loaded because you've got to count the cost. You've got to understand that what's your major job, what's the main thing, as we say as coaches, the main thing,
Yeah.
and you clear it up, and it's Christ as King, and even though you're in that we're all are fallible and we all make a lot of mistakes, but attitudes have to be checked, everything has to be checked out because these boys understanding what a man of God really is. But that doesn't mean soft.
Right.
That mean I coached as hard and tough as anybody that I ever saw, and we did because our defensive coordinator was one of the strongest, physically strongest men I ever knew. Powerful man, but we expected a lot out of each other and our kids, but we always kept it into a place where we were doing it for the glory of God and for each other. And if I ever did or said anything that I thought might be in the slightest bit offensive, I would stop on the spot and apologize to anybody that was there and have to course correct. We all made our minds that's what we would do, and we did. And because in competition, in the heat of battle, man, a lot of things start coming up, as you know.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
But we made up our mind that Christ was going to be at the center of all that.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought, when they played us initially, they thought when we got beat 60 or 70 to nothing that's what it's going to be. But Jesus, I think Jesus would say, whatever you're going to do, you better do it with all your heart. And
Yeah.
so we conveyed that as well. But a kingdom coach needs to understand that we really want to do a good job, but we really want it to honor the Lord, and we want it to be at the end of the day, the kids could say, "This was tremendous. This was
Mm.
tremendous." And I think by and large we did that. Ken, you watched from the sideline a lot. You could see what we're trying to do.
No doubt. And that's why I had great respect for Evangel and all of you that were a part of that and have obviously, you've influenced my life for 30 years and consider you a dear friend and a mentor in many
Thank
ways.
you. Likewise.
I think as we come here towards the end, I want to get a little bit, Johnny, into our conversation the other day, talking about still mentoring. And I was sitting in a classroom of a high school I'm helping right now, and
Yeah.
I was jotting these things down on the grease board, and I said, Johnny, we got to talk more about this. But we were talking about sort of what Austin said as a kingdom coach. We were talking about the way of the kingdom. That was our conversation the other day. I was
Yeah.
talking about my son Austin and different
Yeah.
things, and you started talking about revisioning and
Yeah. So
the way
important.
of the kingdom is counterintuitive. And just
Yeah.
share with Austin and our conversation, but our listeners, when we talk about the way of the kingdom and kingdom reality today, as whether it be as a football coach or as a father, what are we saying there, Johnny?
Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up because that's the language I would use in coaching and or in walking with the Lord. It's a revision. I think Jesus gives us brand new eyes,
Mm.
and we can't look at any old problem the old way, or we get old results.
Mm.
So it's continually to revise. What is the best case scenario, and think that way. The problem is never your real problem. It's how you look at your problem is always going to be the biggest problem
Mm.
with a solution. But Jesus was always solution oriented. It always blew me away that no matter where he was, no matter where he stood, he was always in a solution mode. There was always something that he saw that was totally counterintuitive. He told his men, feed the 5,000. Well, how do you turn around and feed 5,000 out in the desert? How do you do that? or the whatever he was doing, he was trying to outcome training was always where he was leading his men to see that there was always a different outcome that God had in mind. And why we get off track on that, I don't know. Ken, you have issues. I'm sure Austin, I have issues, but I woke up this morning, man, and I said, Lord, if you show me a new way to think about it, I'll dwell there. I'll stay there. I'm not going to think old and think that's going to give me some new result.
Coach,
And
when you
so
when
if
you bring
I
that up, oh, go ahead, finish up.
don't go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it just made me think about the story of Elijah, or
Yes.
no, Elisha,
Yeah.
and basically this, and the story goes where a bunch of just there's an army surrounded him and his
Yes.
house,
Yeah.
and his servant goes out and he's panicked because he sees all the things, all the people surrounding him.
Right.
But then he goes and he tells Elisha, and Elisha says, "Here, I'm going to pray for you that you see what I see."
Exactly.
That's that revisioning. He literally prays, and then his servant opens, or his eyes are open. He's
Yeah.
awakened to the truth that he's got even more people surrounding him, protecting him.
That's a marvel. That's the marvel. And we stop camping there. I don't know why we break camp
Yeah,
from that understanding. The scripture there says that his understudy was terrified.
yeah,
Now that's an emotion, a very real emotion, and that's what problems want to do to us, terrify us. But Elijah said, "No, camp here with me. See what I see."
yeah,
And we have a magnificent God, and He's given us permission to believe. We're believers. And somebody the other day said, "What does that mean to you?" And I said, "Well, it means believe the unbelievable." You know,
That's good.
I mean, you have a choice. We can see anything we want to see. You can see the problem looming, or you can see a solution that came out of heaven, and all you could do is hit your knees, raise your hands, and say, "To God be the glory."
Amen.
Man, he saved me again in this situation.
Well,
But that,
it's understanding who God is, right? When you look
yeah,
through the lens of, okay, this is a big problem, but my God's bigger, nothing seems too bad.
that's it. And you have to camp there. I always hit that button. We have to stay there. It's like hold, hold. It's like a quarterback in the pocket, and they get
Yep,
antsy, and you have to say hold, hold now. It's the
yep,
same thing in your walk in God. Sometimes it's hold, confidently hold, but hold the thought. As a
mhm,
man thinks, so is he. So a lot of times we'll say, okay, that's the way I'm going to think. And by the time you get out the door, you're thinking on the problem again. We don't hold. We don't hold. And Jesus said that over and over and over. He said in Mark 11:24, which is one of the most powerful passages on prayer you can find. And he says, I urge you when you pray, be convinced that you already have it. Be convinced that you already have your request, and then you shall manifest it. Then you shall receive it. And I don't know how that gets by most, but that's exactly what he said. Hold to your faith imaging. Hold to where you have the job that you need. You have this that you need. You have that. He knows what we need, and he wants to fill it before you even get it filled, because that's where he gets glory. You see,
yeah,
that's how this game is played. He gets glory by doing something that just totally blows you out of the water,
yeah,
right? And for some reason, Christians stop thinking that way, and
yeah.
we settle. We settle for whatever it is, and that's the way it's going to be. And what I'm supposed to now just be tough in the middle of it. Well, um, Tribulation's part of it and being faithful. But where does our faith go? Where does our faith imaging go? Where's our revision of the situation go? I mean, you got an imagination for a reason,
Well,
and we don't use our faith imagine. I say faith and an imagination because I see faith in the Word of God. It gives me what I'm supposed to be really anchored in. Then I use my imagination to see what all that may feel like
yeah.
if I have it. Then I have the emotion to go to my tomorrow, then to my next day, then to my next day with holding the faith. And that's really helps me a lot is that I just stay focused on what he says. If he says that he gives me permission. Say if I needed, as a man, everybody's needing certain things to take care of the little family. Well, men need to believe. You got to believe.
Yeah.
You got to hold, believe, and then you got to let your imagination come alongside that and keep that and believe that it's yours right now. That's what Mark said, Mark 11:24. Believe that you have already received it. Believe it, that he's faithful to his word. And that's coming from Jesus. So when we ask Jesus, how did you do it? He's going to tell us. He just showed us. He just told us how he did it.
Well, my dad, has actually been talking to me a lot about this. And when you say hold, the thing that keeps popping in my head is abide in the
Abide's a great
vine.
word.
You
It's a
know,
better word. It's a
it's
better
just,
word.
it's
Yeah,
literally like you said, if you're holding in that pocket or you abide in the vine, right?
exactly.
We have everything.
You have
But
we. That's what Peter said in 1 and 3 of First Peter. We have already received everything we need. It's just that we leave it on the table. You
yeah,
see, there are things are on the table that Jesus died for, and it's a great inheritance. And most of us leave it there,
mm,
and we never take it because we don't abide. And see, abiding takes a little time, and we're not good with time. We don't take the time every morning. The last thing I think about, it's almost like my salvation prayer, is that how absolutely good God is to me
Mm.
and how marvelous my tomorrow must be going to be like. Yeah. I mean, if it's anything like what he showed me, I can't wait till tomorrow. Kim will remember this. Joe Namath used to say, I can't wait till tomorrow because I get better looking every day. Joe said that.
Dad,
But
that's that expectancy, right?
it's an
As opposed
expectancy.
to
So
expectation.
yeah, and the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. It's brand new every morning. But see, we would prefer to carry our pity and our doubt around, and we think more about that than we do holding the truth deep in our heart and knowing that if he said it to me, I can take it to the bank. If Ken tells me something, he says, I'm going to call you on Friday. I know Ken's calling me on Friday,
Yeah.
right?
Johnny, the Spirit over the last probably years really, and Austin hears me say this all the time, is really driving home really what you're saying. And he uses these two thoughts. So often we as followers of Christ are living towards something. We think we lack it, we don't have it. The key to the Christian life is living from what
You,
we already have. So
perfect.
from versus towards is so big in our walk.
It's a gigantic difference because in the presence of the Lord is the fullness of joy,
Psalms
pleasures
11.
forevermore. That's happening right now, Austin. Right now in heaven, that's happening. And we can, through the blood of Jesus, we can enter in and have access to the throne of mercy that we might find all that's going on there can be ours right now, right here.
Mm.
And somehow we don't, I mean, living from that position, we're always chasing, hoping that something's going to come through for us, that God hopefully will be faithful and give me what I need. And I don't think that moves him. I think what moves him is thank you, Lord God, that you're alive, powerful, loving, and kind, and that you are wanting to do this for me more than I want it to be done, that I might give you glory and to share that with others, that you did that for me.
Yeah.
And so it's chasing you, and King David said that. He said, surely goodness and mercy chases after me in such a way that it catches me. Now think about his worldview and his view on Christ. Goodness and mercy is chasing me. That's the way King David said it.
Yeah.
What a wonderful way to live.
Yeah.
I say, catch me.
Oh,
That's
wow.
awesome.
Yeah,
As I told you, Austin, when you talk to Coach Booty, you could talk for hours.
I love it.
He's a deep well like you are, son.
I
And
love it. I love you boys,
I
man.
love this guy dearly and excited about, you guys were talking about sometimes we got those barriers or roadblocks, and it made me think of just pulling this off. It was my thankful and grateful prayer today. I said, Papa, in the eyes of the world, they're going to say, there's no way you can get all the booties with all their schedules and flying and all everything that's going on. There's no way you can get them to. Well, I got back from Josh today. We're set for Sunday the 7th, and
Oh,
Abram's
you're
set
at the
Thursday.
treat.
And I'm just trusting that Papa's going to pull this together, because this is a story. The booty story is going to bless tons of people,
I hope so.
and it's
That's my
it's going to be
desire.
so exciting. So, well, I'm going to put you on the spot as we get close here to end, Coach, and not going to try to make you emotional, but I want to put you on the spot with your boys, because we're going to be interviewing them after this. If you could, in your parting words, and you can either do it each one individually or as a group, that's your call. What words do you have to say to your boys after all these years?
That's a heck of a thought, because I pray for them every day, as you do, Ken. And as a father's love for the children, there's nothing like it.
Mm.
But man, I just pray that God gives them the gusto to live for God with all their might. Not to, I'd say, Josh, don't you even remotely think about limiting your dream. I'd say to Abram, uh, brother, you have a father's heart, man. Make sure that you just say what's on your mind, because he always has a rich word. John David, he's had to battle through a lot of scenarios already, but he's being refined in a refiner's fire. He's got a story that will move many, many to the kingdom. And Jack, he's a competitive stud, man. I just say, compete on, son. Compete on, man. Just believe God to help you and be there when you need him. He'll be there. So, and then for my grandchildren, I do the same. I talked to him last night after scrimmage, man. I said, I'm so proud. Keep standing for the kingdom, and all the rest of them. But those would be my parting words, that they would just fulfill the very dream that God's put in their heart.
Wow.
Well said. Austin, any words for Coach?
Well, just hearing him talk about his sons, I mean, I think it's a good glimpse of how our Father talks about us as children, and just because there's an intimate knowledge of each and every one of their sons and where they are and what season they're in. And I heard that when you talked about yours,
Yeah.
and I get that message from the Father as well. And when I was talking to Dad and we're trying to talk about this story, how do we want to approach it? The thing that came popping up in my head is generations, because
Generations.
yeah, you think about how important that was biblically to
Yes.
pass on, you're not just, this story, but the God,
That's it, man.
that relationship from son to son to son to son.
Glory.
And I'm excited to meet your sons and get to hear their story and just see everything I've just seen in this hour, in them. And just obviously there's they're all great athletes. They've all accomplished a lot of things here, and that is generational in itself. In a lot of ways it parallels to like the Mannings,
Yeah.
but but there's something even richer about passing on a faith.
It is. Yes.
And I'm just so thankful for the time and really your life and how it's
Thank you, Austin.
been passed on.
Thank you. I appreciate that, son. I look forward to this time with you too. When Ken told me you're doing your part and parcel of it, I look forward to it.
Austin, you made me have a thought as well that I want to pass on to Coach. First of all, I think, Coach, I love you. And
Thank you. Likewise.
you talked about the generational of the family. And I just was looking at this laptop thinking that, here's Coach Booty, who has played a role in my life, helping me become the man that I am, Austin, over a 30-year period. And here you are sitting, my son, on this podcast, reaping some of the benefits that Coach Booty built into me.
Hmm.
And so friendship is generational. When you really
Yes,
have
it
a true
is.
friendship that's built on the faith of Christ,
It's rich, man.
and you talk about revisioning. Wow. So I'm looking here at my friend who is built into me, and I'm looking at my son who is a piece of the vine of me,
Yeah.
and I just am so grateful. When Austin and I laughed the other day, Coach, when someone mentioned to us his other siblings at Christmas mentioned that we need to start a podcast, and we laughed. Here we are. We lost your picture for a second, Coach, but here we
Yeah.
are for the
I'm,
last 10 times into it now. We're like, whoa. So it's been wonderful. We appreciate you and your time, and we can't wait to share your story with our listeners. And we're looking forward to talking to your boys over the next couple of weeks and your grandson as well.
well, hey, it's going to be great. I can't wait to hear it. I know it's going to be fun and funny, and I can't wait to watch it. I love you, boys.
Love
Love
you
you
too,
too.
Johnny.
All
And
right.
tell
See you,
Stormy
pal.
hello. Bye
All right.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.